Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best build for all 75 brawlers in the game right now. We like to do this every single season because everyone just seems to ask about it, and of course with the addition of kit, people like to know all the new builds. So of course what we're going to be doing is going through every single rarity. I'll leave timestamps for every single brawler in the description, so it's a lot easier for you to revisit this video. But let's go ahead with Shelly then. So Shelly, nothing has changed since last time. Clay pigeons 100% the best gadget. In terms of star powers, both of them can be good. Band-aid is more so good on game modes with more survivability, so game modes like Bounty. Shell shocks, of course, just really good, especially combining with clay pigeons. In terms of gears, again, it just depends on the map. Super grassy, I will go with speed with Shelly. It just pairs really well with her, but on other maps I'll just go for this build. In terms of the next one, then we have Nita. So Nita, pretty much all the time I'll be using the second gadget. Really good at wasting the opponent's ammo, but then I will use bear paws, especially against some aggro brawlers, you know, like Ash, Buzz, etc. It's just good to stop you getting countered. In terms of star powers, bear with me on every game mode except for heist, where hyper bear is going to be better. And then I typically just use this build, and if it's a super open map on heist, maybe I will switch to this one, but I don't really like pet power too much, even with the buff not too long ago. In terms of next brawler, Colt. So again, this can depend on multiple things. Most of the time I do use speed loader, but if I'm on power league and I know I'm countering a certain composition and I want to open up the map against a thrower, then silver bullet can be pretty good. In terms of star powers, I get this question asked a lot. Again, this is just down to your personal preference on what you prefer. Slick boots is better for movement and getting into people's faces, and then I prefer Magnum Special for me, just because you get the additional bullet speed and extra range. I really do love this. And in terms of gears, you can see I've not purchased any other ones. I don't think you need any more. You go Colt in heist or just for pure damage, so you want to go this build right here. In terms of next brawler, then we have Bull. So Bull, I think in terms of gadgets, I go Stomper literally everywhere. In heist though, I will actually use T-Bone Injector just so I can get an extra shot on the safe. Can be good for those moments. In terms of star powers, then I use Tough Guy all of the time, but if you're a player that's a little bit lower in power league, I don't know, around the diamond area, Berserker can be really strong against those lower level players, because they'll just leave a Berserker bull on the safe because they're just not that great. In terms of gears, then again, depends on the map. Typically on a map where Bull is good, I'll be using this build right here, but again, there might be some heist maps with not a lot of grass, so this could be a really good build to take advantage of. In terms of the next brawler, then we have Brock. So again, both gadgets are definitely worthwhile purchasing, because Rocket Fuel is really good at opening up the map, specifically against throwers or just to destroy the opponents and get easy goals in Brawl Ball. Rocket Lace is really good to defend yourself, you know, against like a Fang or just any brawler with any dash ability. It's going to be really good for that reason. In terms of star powers, I really enjoy more rockets, a lot more, unless it's like knockout or bounty, but still I prefer more rockets just because it allows you to confirm the kill so quickly, especially if you're really accurate with your Brock supers. In terms of gears, then pretty much all of the time I just rock with this build. Maybe if I'm playing like bounty or knockout, I'll switch to this. Rarely do I use the extra gadget charge gear unless maybe I'm facing off against a Fang. I don't think it's worthwhile purchasing. And in terms of El Primo, we have two just meh gadgets. Asteroid Belt can be good if you paired it with certain things and just good for pressure and Brawl Ball, but Suplex Supplement's going to be better just for how the way you play Primo. Typically you play Primo, I don't know, against like some other tanks, so it's just good for some denial. In terms of star powers, then both star powers can be good. It depends what El Primo player you are. If you're really good at hitting those supers, this can be really good to boost your DPS, but it's not really a lot of damage. I prefer Meter Rush just because you can make a lot more plays with El Primo, and if you do end up missing your El Primo super, then you can catch up to them pretty quickly. And of course, there's just so many slows and knockbacks. Meter Rush allows you to catch up to the opponents. In terms of what I like using, I change my build quite a lot, but these are the 4 gears that I choose between. El Primo, I pretty much use, I don't know, I like the supercharged gear with him just because that's the best thing about him, right? His super. But if you're up against a tough matchup, I will probably opt to go the health gear just because it allows him to cycle his super quicker. So that's going to be El Primo. In terms of Barley, then I think it's got 2 pretty good gadgets. Again, it just depends on what you're facing. Typically, if I'm just running ladder, I probably would go with this just because there's so many aggro brawlers. You're guaranteed to get value here. And then Herbal Tonic is good on maps. I don't know, like, I don't even know if Canal Grande is in the map right now, but I don't know, say you're splitting lanes a lot. This is just really good to keep the pressure. And in terms of star powers, pretty much, again, it depends what composition you're facing. Both star powers are really good. If you're facing another thrower or just want to get good pressure, medical use is good. And then Extra Nosh is is just really good against tanks, but I don't think any star power is that valuable with Barley, so you can just pick and choose whichever one you kind of feel like. And in terms of gears then, I think it's pretty safe just to go this build right here, but I do like Barley's gadget, especially because he's a really vulnerable brawler, so getting like an extra slow can be really valuable to him to keep him alive for longer. In terms of the next brawler then, we have Poco, so both gadgets are definitely worthwhile purchasing, only if you play Power League though, because Protective Tunes is really good at countering certain compositions. You know, there's a lot of brawlers right now that have a poison, slow, stun, etc. So Protective Tunes is really good for that reason. But most of the time you're going to be running Tuning Fork, which is really good when you pair it with Poco double tank. In terms of star powers then, so it depends on what kind of player you are. You can be a really aggro damage dependent Poco, which is really good with Screeching Solo. I think is a really underrated star power. But the Capo, if you're more of a team player, definitely really good at keeping your tank, and especially if playing hot zone, you can consistently just heal your teammates in front of you. In terms of gears then, pretty much all of the time I'm using Poco, I don't know, a grassy map I would say, but at the same time if you're playing hot zone on an open map like open zone, then you probably want to opt for something like this. Is probably a lot better. Now the last one, Rosa, this is pretty difficult to choose because it is very map dependent, so I'll purchase both of these gadgets. Grow Light can be so good, especially on hot zone or just to cause havoc, but sometimes it can work against you, so for that reason on friendly bushes is probably the safer option and can allow you to close the gap to the opponents and take them down quicker. In terms of star powers then, I like both of these. Again, it can be matchup dependent, so take with that what you will. Both of them are really strong. I actually like Plant Life a little bit more because it pairs, healing pairs really well with Rosa's super, and she's just really unkillable. But if you're facing off against tanks, this can be really strong. And in terms of gears, I pretty much never switch away from this setup. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the super rare brawlers, starting off with Jessie. Super simple for me, everywhere except for Heist, Spark Plug, and then in Heist, Recall Spring is just really good to get that extra damage onto the safe. Pretty much all the time with Jessie, I'm typically playing Jessie on a map with grass, so I'll be using this build. But again, if it's Heist, probably will switch over to something like this. And then if you play Jessie on a non-grassy map, then the shield gear can just be good for that reason, so I actually use 4 gears with her. In terms of star powers then, all of the time Energized Jockey is just awful, unless you've literally just started the game, then it's just not worthwhile getting that star power. In terms of the next brawler event, so Dynamite, Satchel Charge 100% of the time. Maybe on a super bushy map, if you're not a confident Dynamite, then you could go for Fidget Spinner. But Satchel Charge, it is one of the best gadgets in the game. In terms of gears for Dynamite overall then, I think this is the best setup by far. Again, if you don't want to fork out an extra 1,000 coins for the new gear, then you can just go for this setup as well, seeing as throws get good value with the shield gear. In terms of star powers, people like using Dyna Jump. It can be really fun, it can make some cool clips, but Demolition, it actually got a buff with all the changes a couple of months ago, and also just combined with his hypercharge, it's just insane. There's just no reason not to use Demolition. You're just going to send out nukes to the opposition. It's such a good star power. In terms of best gadgets then, so last hurrah pretty much every single time. There are some instances where this is underrated. I have slandered this gear gadget a bit too much, but I think the safe option definitely is Last Hurrah, one of the best gadgets in the game. And in terms of star powers, and since the reload speed nerf a couple of months ago, I have started to try both of these star powers. I think Well Oiled just suits Tick so well, but maybe if there's a matchup where he just needs that extra reload speed, I don't know, if you're not facing off against a throw as well, this star power can be really good. And in terms of gears then, you can see I've not purchased any other gears. All of them are just not worth it on Tick. No matter what people try and convince me or what people waffle about, it's just not worthwhile switching away from those gears. In terms of gadgets then, so star powers and gadgets are definitely vital for 8-bits. In terms of what game mode, you want to be using extra credits in Heist and then everywhere else cheat cartridge. In terms of star powers, you want to be using boosted booster pretty much all of the time, except for if you have a really tough matchup, or if you're playing gem grab, then plugged in is going to be better. Some tough matchups, I'm talking probably enemy snipers or Colette, etc. In terms of the best gears for 8-bit, there's a lot of choice with him. 5 gears I think are pretty much definitely useful for 8-bit, and you need to pretty much get all of these, just because it matters what game mode, what map you play with 8-bit. You know, if you're playing gem grab, you probably want something like this, or you know, something like this as well can be pretty good. If you're playing the likes of heist, you want to be running something like this, or I've seen a lot of people even just use the health gear with him, with the reload gear. It can be dependent on what 8-bit player you are, but there's a lot of versatility with him, and you have to spend a lot if you want to max out 8-bit. In terms of Rico then, so multiple launcher is going to be the better gadget pretty much all of the time in my opinion, but if you're playing a game mode, I don't know, if you're playing like Knockout Belle's Rock for example, you might want to opt for Bouncy Castle, or if you're just not facing against any aggro players, you do need Bouncy Castle. Both gadgets are vital for Rico in my opinion. In terms of star powers, I use Super Bouncy all of the time. This star power might be annoying and seem good, but I just don't get any use for it. I don't know, if you want to have fun, go ahead, but Super Bouncy competitively is the better one. In terms of best gears, then you can have an argument for all 7 gears for Rico, but for me, pretty much all of the time, I will opt for something like the Vision Gear and the Reload Gear, just because Vision Gear is so good on Rico, so underrated, and Reload Speed Gear, even though it only increases it by 15%, I just love it with Rico. The reason why I use Rico is just to spam out attacks as much as possible and annoy the enemies, so that's why I use Reload Gear. But a lot of people don't actually use Reload Gear with Rico. They use the likes of this, or maybe Speed, or something like that, but I think your safe options are probably Vision, Damage, and the Reload if you've only got limited resources. In terms of an next brawl event, Darryl, so he's started to become a bit more meta with the recent buff. In terms of his best gadgets then, so Top Barrel is going to be a better option all of the time, except for in Heist. I don't know, a lot of people love recalling Rotator, but I just love Tall Barrel. It allows you to get more damage with Darryl, of course slowing the opponent so you can get closer to get that damage threshold. In terms of star powers then, I think Steel Hoops all of the time, unless you're playing a base race map, I don't know, like Tornado Ring maybe, Rolling Reload might be better, especially since the projectile speed buff could have more use case. I don't know, not really tested out enough, but Steel Hoops is going to be your safe option, and then you don't need any other gears except for these ones. So again, it's matchup dependent. If you've got a tough matchup, you want to be going to health gear. If you've just want to just base race and run to the opponents, using the speed gear, but damage gear is always the one that you want to buy with Darryl. In terms of the next brawl event, we have Penny all of the time, Salty Barrel 100%. No debates about that. In terms of star powers, so I pretty much use Master Blaster all of the time because you have a knockback with your turret. Might not seem like the most optimal thing, but because Penny just sucks right now, especially against all of these aggro brawlers, just anything to help us survive a bit longer. It's definitely better in this meta. In terms of what I go with Penny then, I don't think it matters what gear you go, so just go damage gear all of the time, and then for me, I kind of like to switch between speed and vision depending on what map you're playing. Next up we have Colt, so all of the time Flying Hook, definitely the better gadget, and in terms of star powers, Protected Pirouette 100% of the time as well, so really easy in terms of that. In terms of gears, this is pretty much the build I go pretty much all of the time here. Maybe you want to opt for the health gear or speed gear depending on the map, but I don't know, I think this setup is just bulletproof overall, no debates about it. So Jacky, this one's an interesting one. So pneumatic booster 100% of the time, one of the best gadgets in the game. And in terms of star powers, Counter Crush I pretty much use all of the time unless you're facing, I don't know, some really long range brawlers. Then Hardy Hard Hat might actually be the better one, but I don't think it's worth purchasing. Counter Crush, you can be safe with that, and it depends on what map you're kind of playing, but pretty much all of the time I really do like going this type of setup. So I know you need the extra damage with Jacky, but at the same time, the thing about Jacky is that once she runs out of gadgets, she's pretty much a sitting duck. So you want to make sure that you've always got a gadget available, and an extra gadget charge gear can be really good for that. And in terms of the last one then, so Gus all of the time, Kooky Popper, even since the nerf, it's still just really good for instant damage. And in terms of star powers, Spirit Animal 100% of the time as well. In terms of gears, there's a lot of use case for a lot of them, but I think because Gus primarily gets countered because he doesn't have enough DPS, so damage gear really safe for that. And then again, just extra damage with that Kooky Popper, so you need the gadget charge gear with Gus. So now we're moving on to the epic brawlers. So there's about 20 of these. Strapping is going to be a long one, but starting off with Bo then. So for me, I literally always use Super Totem unless you really want to remove walls and make quick goals in Brawl Ball. Tripwire can be good, and both players actually play Tripwire, but my personal preference is just this one. It allows you to build up your super maybe one shot quicker. I don't know, maybe that's just in my head. That's just the way I play with Bo. In terms of gears, I think these are the only 3 that you really need. You could maybe opt for the health gear as well, can be underrated with him, but I think you can never go wrong with going vision on bushy maps, and then just going this. It's bulletproof literally everywhere. In terms of star powers, Snare Bear, pretty much 95% of the time, but there are a few maps like Tornado Ring or a few others where this is pretty underrated. Good for just making sure you're not getting it crept up on, but I'd say pretty bulletproof for just going this combination right here. In terms of M's then, so she's not really been used too much in this meta, but in terms of gadgets, 100% friend zoner. And then I actually prefer Bad Karma maybe a little bit in this meta, just because for me she just still doesn't deal enough damage. I don't know if that makes sense, especially with the hypercharges. So Bad Karma probably, especially in heist. I don't know, hype you can get a lot of value with if you catch multiple people in it, but it's pretty hard in this meta, and this is going to be your best gear setup. In terms of next brawlers then, so we have Stu. It matters about what game mode and map you're playing. Most of the time you will be using Speed Zone, I would say, because he's primarily better on game modes like Hot Zone. But if you're playing Brawl Ball, you know, Breakthrough can be your better option. In terms of star powers, I would say 90% of the time, Gas the Heal, it's one of the best star powers in the game, but there are some matchups where Zero Drag can be really good, and especially if you're a good Stu player, you can make some good usage of that, but you do need low ping to play a good Stu. In terms of gears then, so you can see I've got a lot of different gears that you can go, but I think the most bulletproof, pretty good for every single situation, is just this setup right here. Because of the heals, it allows you to get back to that shield gear a lot quicker, and also just because he's quite squishy, I would say that shield gear is good on him, and of course damage as well. In terms of Piper then, so Piper's got two really good gadgets. If you're just playing ladder, blindly, then auto aim is your safe pick pretty much all of the time. But if you're playing bounty or knockout, of course homemade recipe is going to be better. And then in terms of star powers then, so ambush, it is still pretty good on some bushy maps, but I still prefer snappy sniping just because of how hard Piper hits anyway. It really rewards you, especially if you start tapping. It's really strong, and specifically her biggest counter is her lack of reload speed. If you miss a few shots, then you're really punished, and especially against spawners as well, snappy sniping is really good for that reason. In terms of gears then, a lot of times I like to swap depending on the map. You can see I've got literally all of them, but if I was to go with two bulletproof, it would just be this setup right here. And you can also just never go wrong with this setup. An extra homemade recipe is so vital to confirm a lot of kills, so I think this is probably her best build overall. In terms of Pam then, so again, Scrap Sucker 100% of the time, no debates here. Mama Squeeze 95% of the time. I don't really see too much value with 96 extra healing still. In terms of gears then, I think Mythic Gear 100% of the time. This is such a good gear, specifically against those low DPS brawlers like Stu. They're just never going to kill Pam with his Mythic Gear. And then again, it can depend on what map. I think you can never go wrong with maybe Vision and also their gadget charge gear. I just think having 4 Scrap Suckers is so good, especially if you get a good gadget off. You're basically getting a free kill every single time, so that's the build I run with Pam. In terms of Frank then, I don't know, both gadgets can be good. I think because there's so many stuns and cancellations, this is probably the better gadget, but I just still really enjoy this one because you can one-shot so many brawlers if you get that damage gear activated. In terms of gears, you can see I never swap between these three, just depending on the map and mode and scenario. And also, I don't know, both star powers are just meh. Power Grab I've been trying out a little bit more recently just because he's just trash, so he needs that extra damage and that little bit of surprise factor, but Sponge is probably the better one. I don't really care about Frank right now. Next up we have Bibi. So first gadget every single time, by far the better gadget. The other one's just useless. I don't even know why anyone wants to run that. And then again, it can depend on what BB player you are. Because I'm not a good BB, I won't offer too much advice. I do pretty much use Batting Stance most of the time though, but if you're in the open, you want to use your juking powers, and Home Run can be really good. And in terms of gears, again, not really the best BB, so take mine with a pinch of salt, but I just switch between these depending on the map. Next up we have B then. So I use Rattled Hive all of the time really, unless you're playing B into like a Gene or something like that, or maybe against another sharpshooter. You might want to use this just to tank that extra shot, but Rattled Hive is so good for pressure and actually deals a lot of damage now. And in terms of star powers, I think Honeycomb is used 99% of the time by the pros, but Insta-Beload is a good star power as well, so don't be ashamed if you got that from like a star drop or something. Both good star powers, but Honeycomb's just a bit better just because B's pretty squishy, allows you to tank a few extra shots. In terms of gears then, again, you can go a lot of gears with B. A lot of times I just like to be boring and use damage and shield because she's pretty squishy. And if you get the damage gear popped with the big sting, then it's just gonna delete people, right? But sometimes if I feel annoying, I will go for like this setup. Or if I'm playing a grassy map, you definitely need the vision gear with B, because grass is her biggest counter. Next we have Nani. So both gadgets are needed with Nani, because if you're playing heist, then you need water blast. If you're facing off against snipers, then you need return to sender. In terms of where you use these star powers, you want to be using this star power everywhere except for bounty and knockout, because you need that extra bit of damage with your super. But still, this star power isn't even that good. It doesn't really confirm that many kills when I play it, so yeah, take that with a pinch of salt. In terms of gears, then I pretty much never swap away from this setup unless I'm playing, I don't know, maybe if I'm facing it off against a Piper or a Mandy, or if I'm playing heist where I want an extra TP, then the gadget charge gear is actually really underrated with Nani. Next up we have Edgar. In terms of gadgets, 100% of the time, let's fly. It charges up his hyper charge, it charges up his super. What is not to love about this? One of the best gadgets in the game. Hardcore, yeah, it can be good if you're a noob, but I think Let's Fly is definitely the better one overall. In terms of star powers, then, to begin with, I did like hard landing just because I wanted to confirm the kill as much as possible, but because of the way you want to charge your hypercharge up more, fisticuffs allows for that extra healing as well. It makes him a really hard kill. I don't really notice the difference too much, but just so I can get that extra supercharge, I go for this setup. In terms of gears, then, I always get this question asked a lot. Most of the time I will go for this setup. If I'm in heist though, I will probably opt for this setup instead, but I've seen people switch between these three gears. You can never go wrong with any of these three. All of them are really good with Edgar, but as I said, pretty much all the time I use this setup. In terms of Griff, then, he's not really meta, doesn't matter too much. Piggy bank 100% of the time. Keep the change 100% of the time. Business resilience 100% of the time, sorry. Keep the change. You can use a few times actually against tanks, but I still think business resilience is better overall. And then I just go with this build, pretty bulletproof overall. Kind of get some decent value out of health gear though, but I think you need the extra damage and reload with Griff in this particular meta. Next we have Grom. So Watchtower can be underrated and can be good if you're facing off against a Gene. Again, it's another kind of soft counter to Gene, but pretty much 99% of the time, radio check, really good at getting that quick kill. X Factor 100% of the time, and then it just depends on what kind of Grom player you want to be like. If you want to be annoying and have 4 gadgets, then you can go with this build, but pretty much bulletproof all of the time, you can go for this. Next up we have Bonnie. So Sugar Rush 100% of the time, Black Powder 100% of the time as well. And in terms of gears, I think you can never go wrong with a gadget charge gear with Bonnie. Having 4 Sugar Rushes is so essential right now. And then again, it just depends on what type of Bonnie player you are. If you can get good damage in heist, then damage gear, but health gear is also really strong with her. She has a lot of HP, especially against some tough matchups. This gear is definitely underrated. Next up we have Gale. So in terms of gadgets, 99% of the time, Twister, really strong gadget. And I think again, 99% of the time, Freezing Snow. Unless you're facing off against a lot of tanks, then this one might be better, but Freezing Snow is such a good star power. Then most of the time, I probably will opt for something like this. Or if I'm playing a really grassy map, then this is a really good build. Vision gear with this star power is so underrated. I really enjoy playing it. Next, we have Colette. So this is such an easy choice. Gotcha 100% of the time. Mass stacks, I pretty much use 95% of the time. Maybe if you're facing off against a lot of assassins, then push it can be better, but I just like mass stacks, keeps you alive really well. And then I never switch off this. Maybe if it's a super bushy map, I might opt for like the vision gear, but you can never go wrong with 4 gadgets with Colette. Next we have Belle. So again, depends on the map. If you're playing a lot of, I don't know, gem grab, playing hot zone, the nest egg is going to be really good. But if you're playing bounty or knockout, reverse polarity is so good. There's a lot of good bounce shots you can get to start the pressure. Next, star power, positive feedback 100% of the time. I don't know, unless you're facing like 3 aggro brawlers, that's the only way grounded would be better. And then in terms of gears, you can never go wrong with the reload speed gear. Then again, depending on what map or mode you're playing, shield gear is good on the passive game modes, and then damage is good if you're playing heist, brubble, etc. Next we have Ash. So chill pill 100% of the time, and first bash 100% of the time as well. And in terms of gears, I never switch from this setup. People will argue maybe this or this can be underrated with him, but I just think you never go wrong with this setup. Unless you're not playing a bushy map, then you can go with this. But yeah, you never go wrong with speed and damage with Ash. Next, we have Lola. So freeze frame 100% of the time. Improvise, I would say probably like 70% of the time. You can get some really good value out of this on hot zone in particular. It's so good at keeping you alive. So good, for example, if you've just respawned and a teammate is on that zone, getting pinched, it can really clutch for long range heals as well. And in terms of gears, I never switch off reload speed gear. I think it's so vital for Lola. And then you can never go wrong with damage or vision. So damage going to be good in heist or just good at shredding people. Vision going to be good on grassy maps with Lola. Next, we have Sam. So magnetic field 100% of the time. Hearty recovery 100% of the time. And I never switch away from this setup right here unless, again, I'm not playing a grassy map. And then you don't really need to buy any of the other gears. And lastly, for the epics, we have Mandy. So in terms of what gadgets are better, it can depend on what Mandy play you're on. Most of the time, I think Caramelize is better. But the way I play Mandy, especially on Knockout and Bounty, Cookie Crumbs is so good at enabling you to cycle your super a lot more. Or if someone is super weak, you can finish off the kill with Cookie Crumbs. So I really like it for that reason. Star powers in my sights 100% of the time. And then all of the time as well, I use this setup. I don't really want to switch away from anything other than that in terms of gears. Next up, we have Maisie. Super simple. Disengage 100% of the time. Tremors 100% of the time, and this setup pretty much every single time as well. But there might be again a bushy map, so I probably go for speed and vision even if a super bushy map. But pretty much all of the time I want at least a gadget charge gear. It's so vital with Maisie. You're able to make a lot of pop-off plays with it. In terms of Hank, then the best brawler in the game, Barricade 100% of the time. It's gonna blow 100% of the time. This stop power is terrible. And in terms of gears, again, just depends on the map. All three of these gears are really good. Honestly, I just prefer this setup just because the way Hank is, and it's really awkward for him to heal. Health gear is just so good, as of course him being a tank. And then lastly, we have Belle. So Overcooked 100% of the time. Heat shield pretty much 99% of the time, unless you're facing a lot of aggro brawlers, and this can be underrated, but I wouldn't bother purchasing it. The reason why you want to play Belle is for this extra shield. And then I pretty much never switch away from this setup as well, unless it's a bushy map. Then Vision Gear is underrated, but it's so bulletproof going to this setup. Health and damage is so strong with Belle. So now moving on to the mythic brawlers, starting off with Mortis. Survival Shovel 100% of the time. Cord Snake like 90% of the time. I don't really use Creepy Harvest too much, but there will be Mortis players which will vouch for it. But I think most of the time Cord Snake is just better. In terms of gears, I never switch off this setup really unless it's a super bushy map. I might go for speed, but again, people are asking about this mythic gear. I think it's pretty much useless. Maybe if you're a terrible Mortis player, you can make some cool plays with it. It can help you change bats a lot quicker. So I actually sometimes use this gear for a bit of fun, but if you're playing it competitively, that's going to be your best setup by far. In terms of Tara, then this gadget 100% of the time. In terms of what star power, if you're facing off against single shot brawlers, Black Portal is good. I just like Healing Shade because there will be quite a few opportunities for this pet to get so much value in terms of its healing, and in terms of what build you want to go. I pretty much opt for this all of the time. Super bulletproof with Tara. Next up, we have Jean. So in terms of gadgets then, Lamp Blowout is good if you're playing like Brawl Ball, Gem Grab, but typically you play Jean on more passive game mode, so Vengeful Spirit is going to be better for that reason. Star Power, Magic Puffs 100% of the time, and then this setup all of the time, unless I don't know, I'm playing like Belle's Rock where there's not a lot of grass, of course, then you probably want to opt for something like this instead. Next we have Max. So Phase Shifter 100% of the time. Star powers, I don't know, just depends on what matchup really. You can't go wrong with either of them. Typically I like Supercharged a bit more. You can cycle supers a little bit more frequently, but again, Max probably needs the extra DPS, so just entirely up to you. I pretty much go for this build all of the time. I just really love this setup with Max. She needs extra damage and she can get back into the action with the health gear, but you can't go wrong with some shield or some speed. I don't know, there's a lot of options you can go with Max. With Mr. P, I think that Service Bell is better pretty much all of the time. You can get value with this one if you're up against maybe another thrower or a sharpshooter, but Service Belle, pretty much better all of the time. I think Revolving Door is better as well. You want to use Mr. P, right, to waste your opponent's ammo, so that's the reason why I use this, just for that extra 20% in HP. And in terms of gears, then I pretty much go this all of the time, unless of course push him up. Vision gear. Next we have Sprout, so Transplant all of the time really. Overgrowth all of the time, even on a bushy map. I just like Overgrowth. You're able to get a lot more pressure with it, and then I never really switch away from this setup whatsoever. In terms of the next broad event, we have Byron, so both gadgets can be useful. I think Booster Shots is really underrated. It allows you to cycle through your super so quickly, and also good against tanks, so I just love this gadget. In terms of star powers then, can be matchup dependent as well. I just like melees because it's so annoying, especially if you've just been melees. I don't know how it feels, so I just want to melees people as much as possible. This star power is very underrated. And in terms of what gears are like, I like this cell. Byron's really squishy though, so I probably would say this is the best one overall, but I have fun with 4 booster shots for sure. Next we have Squeak, super simple, residue all of the time. I actually think people are starting to switch back to super sticky though, just because it allows you to confirm kills a lot easier. But if you need that extra DPS, chain reaction is bulletproof as well. You're always going to get value with chain reactions, so probably a bit more of a safer pick in this type of meta. And then again, you never want to switch away from this build whatsoever. The gadget charge gear is essential, and of course you need that extra damage with Squeak. Next up we have Lou. In terms of gadgets, 100% the second gadget every single time, and hypothermia every single time as well. You just don't need the other star powers or gadgets, they're just useless. In terms of the gears then, I pretty much go this every single time. It's really good to have an extra one of these gadgets, so strong. And also in terms of supercharge, just allows you to cycle your super one shot quicker. I don't know if it's as essential anymore, so you could definitely opt for a damage gear instead, but yeah, Lou's starting to fall off a bit, so you don't really need that supercharge gear anymore. In terms of Ruffs, I think both gadgets can be useful. I think most of the time I will use air support with Ruff, so just to get that increased pressure, get that lane presence, and then you can start a spawn trap. But takeover is definitely good against single shot brawlers. You just gotta be careful, because sometimes if you're facing off against like a Penny or something that deals splash, then it's not really useful at all. Air superiority pretty much all of the time, unless you want to play a group composition. If you're playing like knockout, this one can be really solid as well, so probably worthwhile getting both star powers, to be honest. In terms of gears then, so again, depends on the matchup. Most of the time you can't go wrong with going this setup, but the reason why I went for vision and speed is because I think I was playing harder up mine, so that can be a really underrated build as well. Next up we have Buzz. So in terms of his gadgets then, pretty much all the time you want to be using the first gadget, but there are a lot of instances, especially on the maps out in rotation, there's so much grass, so X-ray shades is actually really underrated. You combine that with Eye Sharp, you've just got vision of the entire bushes, especially again on all of these brawlable maps out in rotation. And in terms of the best builds overall then, I think this is a good setup. Buzz is kind of underrated since the health buff, so this could be a very good setup for him overall. Next we have Fang. So super brain dead brawler, you can just be good with either gadget. Honestly, Corn Through is really underrated, especially against a tougher matchup. If you're facing higher HP brawlers, I don't think there's really too much of a need for roundhouse kicks, so Corn Through can be good for that reason, especially on a map with a lot of walls. I see a lot of people use it, honestly, pretty underrated. And again, Divine Souls are going to be probably better on knockout, bounty, or if you're facing off against high HP brawlers, which you know you're not going to kill by that fresh kicks threshold, but you know, fresh kicks 95% of the time, probably the best star power in the game at the moment. The main reason why he's so broken with the hypercharge. And in terms of gears, I never switch away from this setup whatsoever. So next up we have Eve. In terms of gadgets, gotta go 100% of the time. Star powers, I think both of them are just okay. You could probably go without a star power with Eve, that's what I do on my mini account, but if I was to have to pick one, Unnatural Order is probably the better one. But Happy Surprise can be underrated against those sharpshooters. In terms of gears, all of the time I'll just go for this setup, but if the 2k coins is a little bit too pricey right now, probably will just go safe and just go damage or the shield. But you definitely need a reload speed gear with Eve, I really love it. In terms of Janet then, super simple, drop the base 100% of the time, vocal warm-up 100% of the time. And again, you can never go wrong with this build, but typically I like playing Janet on bushier maps just because you got drop the base for scouting, and then you can go with this type of setup, speed and vision, and then it's just impossible for the enemies to sneak up on you. You can just be so annoying with Janet, and she's secretly underrated in this meta for sure. Next we have Otis. Fat splatter 100% of the time, ink refills 100% of the time, and then again, just depends on what matchup you have. I don't really think supercharged gear is worth it. I did use it a lot, but at the same time, it still just only takes one less ammo to get your super, so you may as well go with like speed and damage, or of course you actually use Otis a lot on bushy maps, so this is what setup I typically see by the pros. Next up we have busters, so slow-mo replay all of the time, Kevlar vest all of the time, and then probably something like this, or like the damage gear, speed and damage, or I don't know, I see a lot of people just switching between speed, damage and the gadget charge gear. You can never go wrong with any of them, just as good as each other. Next up we have Gray, so walking cane 100% of the time, and depending on the game mode, if you play knockout or bounty, I will say fake injury is better because you can tank a lot of heavy supers, you know, like a Mandy super or a Nani peep. It's just really easy, and just piper shots as well. But everywhere else you want to be going new perspective. In terms of gears then, I think because Grey lacks the DPS, you probably want to go for something like this, but definitely the shield gear can combine really well with fake injury as well. But 100% of the time you need to use gadget charge gear, so good with that walking cane gadget. Next up we have RT, so hacks 100% of the time. Recording, I would say like 95% of the time. Maybe if you're on a map where you know you're never going to get the chance to use your super, then quick maths can be okay, but I don't think it's really worthwhile. I just really like recording for that extra bit of tankiness. You know, if it's knockout and you're in that 1v1, recording saves you actually a lot. In terms of gears, then you can see this is a setup I use pretty much all of the time. Maybe if you're facing off against some really annoying brawlers, you want to go for like this and knockout, but I will say that health definitely, and then just switching between these two. And then next up we have Willow, so again, just depending on what kind of Willow you want to be. If you want to be really annoying with that extra bit of damage, Spellbound can be good, but a lot of times I like Dive because it can waste a lot of resources, a lot of supers, etc. But at the same time, you're just still going to appear from the same spot, and you're just probably going to die once you reappear. But I do like Dive, kind of meaning for some sneaky plays. In terms of star powers then, I'll use Love is Blind pretty much all of the time, just because it's so hard to hit your super with Willow. You're hardly ever going to get value out of this one, so you may as well just go for Love is Blind. And then in terms of what gears I like using, pretty bulletproof with this setup, but sometimes I actually like using the vision gear with Willow, weirdly enough. Maybe I'm just a psychopath. I don't really know. Next up we have Doug, so pretty much all of the time I use the one that deals double the damage, because of course he doesn't really do too much damage. Doug, he's just terrible. But maybe if you're literally solely trying to heal, if you're playing Doug for some reason on knockout, then double sausage can be good. I don't know. Next we have star powers. I think self-service is the better star power overall, but I think both of them are a little bit lackluster, to be fair. Don't think they're really that strong, so you can live without them both. And then again, map dependent, but pretty much when I use Doug, it's a bushy map, so I use speed and damage overall. We've got 3 more to go. So in terms of gadgets, all of the time I use Ghost Train. Maybe there's a few instances pros can make rerouting work really well, especially in Heist, but I'd say Ghost Train is the safer option overall. And then again, it can depend on what map you're playing, so both of these star powers are good. If you're playing Heist, then Pit Stop probably is the better one, but if you're playing, I don't know, like Hot Zone, Brubble, where you're not going to get a chance to set up full posts, you may as well just use this, and it's actually an underrated star power, stealing the opponent's ammo. And then pretty much all of the time, I just use this setup. You don't need the gadget charge gear, you don't really need shield with Chuck unless there's no grass, so pretty much I use this setup. Pretty good overall. Next up we have Charlie, so spiders 100% of the time, one of the best gadgets in the game right now. Digestive 100% of the time as well, and I always use gadget charge as well. Pretty much every map, every situation I use this. And then again with Charlie, it just depends on the map. You can use damage, you can use health, you can use vision, but pretty bulletproof overall just using this setup. I use it all the time. And then with Mico, then I've seen a lot of people switch between gadgets. I've seen a lot of pros actually prefer Presto. I don't know, it's quite 50-50 to be fair. I've started to use Presto a little bit more just because you can latch onto the opponent, especially if you combine it with Monkey Business. Pretty much easier, and just a lot. I don't know, when you press this gadget, it's not visible by the opponent, so you can be really sneaky with it. But clip and scream's pretty good, especially to finish off kills or to slow opponents. Both are pretty good, just go with whatever you want. And then in terms of gears, I pretty much just cycle through all of these three for sure. Star power, 100% monkey business, pretty plain and simple. And finally, moving on to the legendary brawlers, starting off with Spike. So life plant you want to be using everywhere out except for heist, where pop pin cushion is going to be really good, especially if you can get on top of a safe. In terms of star powers, I use curveball pretty much every single time. There are some underrated use cases for fertilizer though, especially if you're facing off against a lot of tanks. But I still feel like curveball is a better option right now. In terms of gears then, even since the nerf, mythic gear is the best gear for him overall. And then it just depends again what matchup you're playing. A lot of gears are really versatile, so this is why I say it a lot. But vision gear on the grassy maps, if you're facing off against some snipers, you probably need that extra bit of shield. And then of course, just damage is always going to be bulletproof on Spike. He deals insane amounts of damage to people. Next up we have Croven. So still feel like slowing toxin is the better gadget. I don't know, I've been kind of experimenting with defense booster a bit as well. Both of them just feel quite meh with him. You could go with either depending on your play style. In terms of star powers then, both of them again are just a bit meh. If you're facing off against tanky brawlers, carrying crow is going to be better, and on heist as well. But I still feel like extra toxic's probably a bit better, just because you're reducing the damage from the opponents. It's pretty hard to tell because Crow isn't the best in the game right now. In terms of gears then, again, it can just depend on what type of Crow player you are. If you want that extra bit of DPS, you could go with a really sweaty build with carrying Crow, with the mythic gear, and maybe even the damage gear as well, and you can actually shred through some people. But I think it's quite safe to probably go like the shield gear with Crow, and maybe like speed, something like that, just because he's pretty squishy, and the speed gear with him is so strong. So feel free to experiment, but I'd say most time I would go with the shield gear and also the speed as well. Next up we have Leon. So this one, again, a lot of people like to switch a lot with Leon, but lollipop drop 100% of the time. In visit heal, I'd say 90% of the time, but there are some really good use cases for smoke trails if you want to catch the opponents by surprise, because most people, especially at the high level, just expect you to go in visit heal. So if you can confirm some quick kills with smoke trails, it can actually be really good star power. In terms of the gears then, I think most of the time I will opt for something like this. The extra damage and also the new and improved mythic gear is really good combined with his hypercharge overall. But if it's a bushy map, I definitely think this combination is better with Leon, just because the extra speed with him is just insane. Next up we have Sandy. Sweet Dreams 100% of the time. Rude Sands literally all of the time as well. Even on non-bushy maps, I just think Rude Sands is a better star power overall. And then gears, I never switch away from this setup, even since the buffs to this mythic gear. It's just useless, don't get it, just stay with this build overall. Next we have Amber then. So this one has changed a little bit. So I think most of the time, I'm not trolling here, Dancing Flames is a better one. And there's also a bug with this gadget where, if you guys know the true red, true blue, I don't know how you can tell that beginning of the game, but one person, you might get the chance to deal 6k damage instantly with this gadget. So can be broken in some senses, but it's actually just a better gadget overall right now. But if you know you're not facing against any aggro brawlers, then 5-star is going to be very good, because you can latch onto the opponents and take them down quickly. And it's just really good with Amber anyway, so you can cycle through your supers with Wild Flames. And then in terms of gears, then I never switch away from the reload speed gear, and then this can just depend on the matchup. I don't think the mythic gear is worth it whatsoever, but the vision gear is really good on bushy maps. Well, you might think, well, vision gear with Amber, that doesn't make sense, but trust me, it does. She's really good at just scouting bushes, so then she can cycle to her super, so that's why vision gear is good. But then I pretty much just use damage gear, and I've seen some people use health gear with Amber as well. Next up we have Meg. So in terms of gadgets, I actually like Toolbox most of the time. Jolt and Volts can just be pretty simple. You get extra healing 2500, but Toolbox is just good for survivability, especially if you're facing off against Nani, Piper, any big damage dealers. Then Toolbox is good to give you an extra shot worth of survivability, so you can survive 6, 7, 8 shots with Meg. It's insane, the survivability with this brawler, and that's why I use Force Field pretty much all of the time. But if you are facing off against a Carl or any type of Buzz, Heavy Metal is going to be very good. Edgar as well, just to push the opponents back and deal a good amount of damage as well. Pretty much all of the time I go for this setup, but again, if I'm playing knockout bounty, I might want to opt for something like this. Next we have Surge. So new and improved Surge, a couple of buffs to his HP, and he's starting to get a bit better. I think in competitive play, Power Surge is probably the better gadget overall, because good players can really keep you stuck at that first level. But if you're playing ladder, I'd probably opt for Power Shield a bit more, just because it allows you to make more pop-off plays and be a bit more threatening. In terms of gears, I pretty much never switch away from this. Of course, if it's a non-grassy map, you go to this one as well. And of course, in Showdown, you go to the max. And in 3v3, you go serve Ice Cold. Next, we have Chester. Again, I don't know, Candy Beans. I feel like because of how bad Chester is, I've actually been going Candy Beans, even though it's very RNG. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it just doesn't. But for that reason, I just go it, because you do need that little bit of extra something with Chester, in my opinion. But Spicy Dice is pretty bulletproof. I think the majority will agree this is probably the better gadget. I'm just crazy because, again, I just like having a little bit more fun. But of course, if you're stuck on a really bad super or a really situational super, you can just try your luck with this gadget. It can be really good. Belle Mania 100% of the time. And then pretty much with Chester, I use Chester on grassy maps, so you want to go for this build right here. And then in terms of Cordelius, all of the time replanting. Maybe if you're facing off against like an Edgar or an assassin, you might want to go for poison mushroom. Or if you're playing Showdown, if you're bush camping, this might be the better one. But because you can use this gadget in the shadow realm, and not only that, it's just super versatile, replanting is the best one overall. Mushroom Kingdom as well, I would say 99% of the time, unless you're playing heist, you might want to use combo shrooms, but pretty much everyone uses his star power as a pro. In terms of gears as well, pretty much everyone uses gadget charge gear. The extra jump is just so vital, and then damage with Cordelius as well. And then finally Kit. So for Kit, there are some use cases for Cheeseburger, especially if you're pairing up with double tank, but I still prefer Cardboard Box. It's for 5-second invisibility, which is absolutely insane. One of the best gadgets in the game. Although it doesn't charge your super faster whilst you're moving, it's just still so good to sneak up onto an opponent and charge that super anyway from just killing them, because you're invisible, right? And then of course, star power is pretty simple. You want to go for this one in 3v3, but it's really, I mean, it's actually a bit better now that they've sorted the bugs with Kit, but it's not that great of a star power. And of course, in Showdown, you want to be going this star power. And in terms of gears, then I really like this setup. Although Kit is super squishy, you might just want to opt for this, but I think 4 invisibilities is so crucial to Kit, especially because a lot of time he's a sitting duck, so you want to make sure that you're being invisible. And you know, as long as you've still got one gadget left, the opponents always might think you're invisible, so it's just that threat to have overall. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. A really long list. Of course, I really appreciate you guys' support on this video. Let me know if there's any ways you want to see improvements onto it, but I'd say not much has really changed in this meta, probably outside for the Amber gadget, but you guys still like to see an updated list. So that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.